Sometimes life lets you down and you feel that you are done. You just want a morning run because the fun is all gone. But sometimes life makes you proud when you look far and wide, when you leave the pain behind and see the brighter side. TNC gives you inspiration. TNC reignites your passion. TNC starts your transformation. TNC helps you see the new you.
The new channel. The new channel. The views, opinions, and insights expressed in the following show are those of the hosts, producers, guests, and viewers. They do not necessarily reflect the position of the channel. Viewer discretion is advised.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the new channel. Here to help you see the new you. This is Jesse Francis Rebustillo, your host to this wonderful program, HR Hotline. Welcome back to the HR Hotline. Today is the day the Lord has made. I love the topic that we're going to discuss. It's about servant leadership. We are in challenging times, and as HRs, as in business, all leaders, we must be Christ-like, just like Jesus. There should be compassion. We need to be servant leaders. But you know, servant leadership is a paradox. It's actually a philosophy. It's a philosophy wherein you don't focus on yourself. A lot of people are so focused on themselves. Very traditional. You're after the thriving, the gain of your organization, of yourself. You have to be beyond that. I'm so glad that I grew up in a family, and that is what we call breeding, wherein we have this emotional intelligence dimension of awareness that in anything that we do, we are aware of our roles. Servant leadership, again, is a paradox. It's a philosophy. When it becomes corporate, when it becomes a style, it is what we now call transformational leadership. But you know, it cannot be taught. It cannot be taught. Because that desire comes from within. Listen, a lot of those, I am not trying to categorize people, but a lot of those new generation leaders may have forgotten that philosophy of servant leadership. I think only Mahatma Gandhi and Mother Teresa were able to perfect it. I am still perfecting it. But you know, I mentioned it's a paradox. Because, say, for HR people, of course, you source them, you recruit them, you select them, you onboard them, you take care of them. But it's more than that. You treat them as customers. It's just like how I treat my may katulong, may kasambahay. I don't treat them as my helpers. You treat them as family. But that is easier said than done. So what is actually the paradox in servant leadership? Leading enough to serve. I will tell you the rest at the end of our show, of our episode. At this time, I would like to introduce a dear friend of mine whom I actually already listed as one of my guests here in HR Hotline. Just like my dear friend Femari Kabantak, she has been in the list, but in God's time, I'm looking for the right timing that they will be here to share their thoughts. Now, my guest today is actually a dear friend. We have been together in the People Management Association of the Philippines for the longest time. And I always regard her as that lady who is well dressed and very particular with her demeanor. She is so proper. I knew it because I learned she is a Teresiana. She's a Teresiana. Iba po. And then she grew up in Baguio. Like me, I grew up in Legazpi. So there is still what you call the the culture if you grow up properly. The reason why I like her because she has when she meets, she's a smile, and she always have a sentence or two so cordial. And I remember when I was what I seldom a host in a GMM, and I can still remember this is actually around 10 or 15 years ago, but I can still recall vividly that after my hosting, she greeted me. I love your hosting. At the time, I was still perfecting it. And you know, I mentioned it earlier, what she told me. I love what you uttered. This is the day the Lord has made. And you know, when I ran for president, she was also the one who assured me, I will help you. Uh, I will promote and endorse you. Going back to that, this is the Lord, because it's only now that I knew she's a member of Serviam and the head of the pastoral apostolate. I will read it. Yeah, apostolate of. Uh, I'll ask her about that. It's about Servant Leadership Council. Corporate, she was with the Semicon, and then she joined Telecom, Wipro. Did I pronounce it properly? Then she was with the BPO. That is where I usually see her, because before, when I was in the Enquirer, we were the ones who were sponsoring C Cup, and she was already there. And I'm so happy that she's also like me now. She's a happy retiree, but she's just like me now also. She's now the managing director of the Carita Consulting Company. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Grace Moniz Decena.
Hi, Jesse. Thank you so much. And I
Yes.
agree, this is the day the Lord has made. Um,
I still remember that vividly.
I
You,
know.
when I went down the stage, I didn't expect you to hug me and told me, I like, that is one of those when I was a host in a GMM. And she told me, sabi ko, why? Because I love what you told me. This is the day the Lord has made. I can still remember that, Grace. You know what? I connected it when you sent me your short profile and you told me about your lay ministry. Can you tell us about that? Let's start with that.
Okay, let's start with that. And I'm happy to start with that, Jesse, especially today as we today is a feast day of St. Therese of Lisieux.
Yeah, yeah, you are in red. Yeah, yeah. Saint Therese
And,
is my favorite saint.
you know, even St. Therese said something like, do not be afraid to be with the small ones, because that is when Jesus would stoop down to get you by his hand and carry you by the palms of his hand.
I
So
love
the
that.
stooping down of Jesus is actually servant leadership, and that is the motto. That is the advocacy of Serviam Catholic Charismatic Community.
I
Serviam
see.
was founded by the late Cardinal Sin and our late Tito Sani de los Reyes. So Tito Sani was very active and was known as a lay leader in the Catholic Charismatic. And so my husband and I are part of the community, and we actually had the pastoral apostolate. And Serviam speaks of servant leadership. In fact, I would like to share that we have put together or hosted 3 servant leadership conferences. The first one of which was open to pastoral workers, parish workers. And then we moved on to having the second Serviam Leadership Conference, which was held at the Crown Plaza. And this was for the government, from the police to the generals to government employees to government leaders. And so we opened up the Servant Leadership Conference to them. Then the last of which was just 2 years ago when we had the Servant Leadership Conference for the business world. And that was where we went in partnership with MAP. And as you've said, servant leadership is truly a paradox. And it's a paradox of the leadership of Jesus himself. And probably the question that one would have would be, how can I be a servant leader? What mindset should I have?
Yes.
And we are, we have Robert Greenleaf, who's actually the head of the Center for Servant Leadership. He started this many years ago. And I'd like to quote Mr. Robert Greenleaf when he talks about servant leadership. And that would give us actually the mindset that we should have if we want to be a servant leader. And he said, the servant leader is a servant first. And I think, Jesse, that's where the paradox comes in.
Yes,
Because you're
yes,
a
yes.
leader, but you
But you
have to
have
be a
to be a
servant
servant.
first. Correct. It begins with that natural feeling. It has to come from you that you want to serve. You're not being pushed to serve, but it comes from inside that you
A
would like
desire.
to serve
A desire. It's a desire.
because it is a calling.
Yes, yes, yes.
It is a calling. And many of us in Serviam have answered that call to be servant leaders. And it starts from the home. You are actually a servant leader in your family. Then it goes to your workplace. You are a servant leader in the workplace. You are a servant leader in your community. You are a servant leader in the associations where we belong. Let's say in PMAP. So it starts from within. It is a desire because it is a calling, Jesse. And we have answered the call.
Yeah. How can we join you in Servium? You know, let me tell. Olin Lee is watching us. It's from PSTD. Obet Policarpio is also viewing us. Aldon is Talia is also viewing us. And Kitty Kituriano is also watching us. How, if you're interested, how can we join? I am a lay minister, so I have already one qualification. How will you join that apostolate?
Actually, you can join Serviam anytime you wish. And right now, with this, with the situation that we are in, we actually have our online corporate worship every Tuesday at 7:30.
I will do that.
And yes,
Uh,
and
uh,
you can log in. It can be it's through YouTube, or it can also be through Facebook. So that's at 7:30 every Tuesday. And go to the Serviam CCC link in YouTube, and you will be able to join us. Now, under normal circumstances, and if I were to share with you my story, we actually joined the charismatic community through marriage encounter. My
I
husband
see.
and I said, let's go for the weekend retreat. And this is as a couple. And we said, when we were invited, the first thing that you say is, wala naman kaming problema. But it doesn't mean that you go for the encounters because you have a problem. So we said yes to join the marriage encounter. It's a 3-day, it starts on a Friday, but your takeaway there is, as a couple, you're actually a love triangle. It's you, your spouse, and the Lord.
Right.
And Jesse, from the marriage encounter, we went through family encounter, we went through the life in the spirit experience where you are actually baptized and receive the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And that's what you are going to share with the people around you. And
Yeah.
they have to see Christ in you, Jesse. That's why, even as HR professionals, I think there's always that stereotype, right? That when you're
Yes.
HR, you're so perfect. Diba?
Wow.
But you really have to be beyond reproach. You have to be a role model. But for that to really come from the heart,
Yeah.
you
You know
have to
why
have,
You know
go
why I
ahead.
mentioned that, Grace? Is that because you mentioned that there is a level. It's nested on the individual, but it should start perfecting it with yourself, with your family, with your community. Then you bring that to your organization. And then I love that. That is actually servant leadership of there is nothing wrong with your relationship, but you accepted that we need to undergo it. I think I like what your mindset of your husband. That is a servant leadership mindset, trying to understand and trying to perfect yourself and be a servant leader. Okay, so while you are on it, let us go back to some basic question. What is your take of what is servant leadership and what is really that mindset of servant leadership?
You know, there are so many parameters around servant leadership.
I know.
But what touched me the most, Jesse, is the mindset of wanting to grow others. So
Yes,
from yourself, it's now being aware of the other people around you because you are there to serve them, grow with those who are being served. So that is, I mean, let's put it in the corporate perspective. So those are your employees, those are your HR team members, for example. And when you help them grow, they actually become better persons. How? They become healthier in mind, body, and spirit. They become more autonomous. They become decision makers because you allow them to make decisions. And then in the future, they're more likely to become servant leaders. And, you know, you and I have been in the HR profession for so many years. And when we look back, doesn't it make you feel fulfilled when you know that you have individuals who used to report to you as, let's say, an HR business partner or employee relations manager or comp and ben, when now they are the leaders of HR in their own organization? To me, and I thank God that I was part of their journey, that I saw them grow their HR career. And I know that I have several of them who are now heads of HR. In fact, my own secretary for 15 years is now the HR manager of ZTE. And she was my secretary, you know? So that is one of the facets of servant leadership, that you
yeah,
want to see them grow. You want to see them grow, and that you have shared a part of yourself to them because you were aware of who they are, you're aware of others, but at the same time, you have to be self aware. So, awareness in servant leadership is two pronged. One is your self awareness, knowing who you are, what your strengths are, what your talents are, what your areas for improvement are. Where am I weak? And knowing others. And so that's when you start to build,
yes,
the
yes.
characteristic of a
That
servant
means
leader.
that means Grace, it's a given that for an HR person, for a learning and development professional, you really have to be a servant leadership. Now, can it be taught? How are you going
Yes,
to how are you going to be able to practice servant leadership? But our first question, how can it be taught?
definitely, absolutely, it can be taught and it can be learned. And I think that's one of the reasons why we ran all of these conferences, because we are propagating the principles and the philosophy of servant leadership. And, during these conferences, we touch on, actually, there are 10 characteristics of a servant leader based on Robert Greenleaf. And that's where we really, really um, share part of Servium to the outside world on these characteristics. Like now, for example, if I may look at the most appropriate characteristic now of a servant leader is listening. Listening to oneself, quieting down, reflecting, and listening to that voice that would tell you, where am I headed for in the midst of all this? And then listening to others. I've been into coaching and counseling sessions lately, Jesse, and some of the younger employees who work from home are just bored. They don't know who to go to. So,
Yes, it's true.
as a servant leader, if you're the line manager of this person, all you need to do is check in, find out how they're doing. How are you doing? A call, a text, and
Yeah,
just listen.
I can, we are just starting with the first one, and that is needed because they think that servant leadership is a lip service. You were able to give an ayuda, you were a little bit so generous, or you showed a little of kindness. It is already servant leadership. But I love your first how to be a good one. The first one is actually listening. And I think, Grace, it will take a lot of changing, unlocking your mindset and changing your mindset. And the younger generation really needs that now. And that is listening. They're so full of themselves and they claim they think that what they're doing is actually what is right. And I think the start for being a good leader is to listen. And I love what you just told us. Listen to yourself as it is nested on the individual so that you can motivate that desire. Grace, can we have Grace again? I would like to see Grace. Grace. The I think the problem there is what is the point that you are going to pivot from your mindset that you now have to express and put into your system the servant leadership philosophy. And I think you nailed it, that you start by listening. Listening.
Coupled with awareness, Jesse, which is self awareness and awareness of others.
Yes.
And
Okay.
then
What
another
is the next?
characteristic,
Yes, yes. The second one is listening, then awareness. And what's the third one before we go to the break? What's the third one,
healing.
Grace?
Healing.
Healing.
Yes.
Wow.
Because it takes a lot of compassion and humility, right? Compassion and humility to heal broken relationships. Let's face it, in the office, you you don't get along with everybody, right? But as a servant leader, you are more accepting of who they are and what they can do, to collaborate with you. And so there's that characteristic of you reaching out to patch differences. It takes a lot of courage and humility. So healing is also another characteristic of a servant leader. But to your point, Jesse, it has to be sustainable. It doesn't happen that you go to a conference, you learned all the 10 characteristics. I know the 10 characteristics, and it stops there. No, it has to be part of your DNA. It has to be
Right.
part of yourself. It has to be part of your day to day living.
Yes. The difference between adopting, the O and the A.
That's
there's a
right.
big there's a big difference. So you go to a conference, you are so learned, you learn a lot, but there is a big difference by adopting or adopting it. The difference of the O and the A, so that it will really hit your nest.
And
That is
have the heart of a servant.
Yes. I know, Grace, I'm learning from you because I also do webinars on emotional intelligence, and it really there is a parallelism. It runs parallel. The
Totally
awareness,
agree.
the
Totally
awareness,
agree.
and an awareness. But what I am learning from you now, that it has to be given to all in the HR profession and for all leaders. for all leaders. And the problem is because when it becomes a style, we call it now transformational. We call it now transformational. But we have to go back to transformational. We go back to the foundation, which is the philosophy of servant leadership. Okay, Grace, we'll go into more details on that. I have lots of questions to you, but let's have first the break. Jay, can we have the commercial, please? Inspiring conversations with Grace Moniz Decena. But before we call Grace, let me share with you the shows in TNC. Jay, can we have the slide? Yes, the big picture shares inspiring stories of notable personalities from Mondays to Fridays. HR Hotline, this is the show. I am your lunch date on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Have an insightful Saturday afternoon because the family business is everyone's business. The fourth project is about life, business, and success stories live from Dubai. Usapang Beauty is about beauty beyond what your eyes can see. The world has faced an unprecedented pandemic. Time to hear positive testimonies straight from those who recovered from the disease. Watch it on Saturdays at 10:30 in the morning. Discover your life purpose and learn from others' turnaround stories by tuning in to You Turn. The home buyer is where you hear remarkable stories about building and owning a property. Love and learn through the puppet stories and magbenta mobili at tumulong dahil bukas na ang TNC Marketplace, an online night bazaar. YOLO is where all of us to understand the law is fun and cool too. Watch and learn about money and more. It streams from the Philippines and the US. Two leaders in one platform, the TNZ, the talk, and then After Shift is a chillaxing show about your choices and lives after work. Then discover and learn strategies and self-leadership through Win Life through Win Within. Then also watch Danny Art Show, Dream, Achieve, and Nurture, and Inspire. Global issues, common interests learn together across borders in foreign affairs. And because health is wealth, watch Healthline on Wednesdays and Fridays. Awesome Day on Mondays at 2:30 and Women at Work on Saturdays. So we have up and coming shows Cyber, NXT, Tech U, and the TNC original One Day. So be with us. This is the new normal. We are the option. Can we have my dear friend Grace again? Okay,
I'm
Grace.
back.
Let's continue our conversation. Let's go to what are the disadvantages and what is it, when is it time that servant leadership will not work? First, go to the disadvantage. What are the disadvantages, known disadvantages of servant leadership?
Actually, just see some of the disadvantages would be if it is not really lived within the organization and the organizational or corporate culture is not ready, it will lead to employees' demotivation,
Yeah.
especially if employees have stereotype leaders that
Yeah.
they should be very aggressive, they should take the lead, they should be the frontliners, right? But in servant leadership, because of servanthood and stewardship, they take the back seat. So just like the shepherd, just imagine a flock of sheep and the shepherd is actually behind. Even Nelson Mandela, who's one of the advocates of servant leadership, mentioned this. A servant leadership is just like a shepherd that leads from behind. And so your flock of sheep are all up front, and there you are leading them from behind. Not too many organizations are ready for that. And
Yeah.
so that is one of the apparent disadvantage that has been observed. Employee demotivation, they become complacent, and sometimes they think that they have a weak leader when in fact the person is really practicing servanthood and stewardship.
Okay. Olin Lee mentioned here that she has a book on the way of the shepherd, and she shared
Oh,
it to her sons. Yeah. Yeah, I think I mentioned that because now I am just curious. How can you be one? Tell us. How can you be one? Say I am 64 years old and maybe Olin is around 35 or 40 years old. How can be a person be one? Or all those leaders that are listening now, how can we start to be one?
listen to the call, and
I love it.
if you are being called to serve, not to lead, but to serve, then that's the beginning. That's the beginning. And of course, there's the humility that goes with it. Because most of the time, as leaders, we're given the role, we're given the position, we're given the power, right? But it has to start with being a humble servant, that
Yes.
I am here to serve. Remember, the Lord said in Mark 10, He said, I came not to be served, but to serve. It's very simple. And we can actually put that in our own lives, you know? Like, let's just go back to the being a servant leader at home. I'm a mother of six and a grandmother of four.
Wow.
And, you have to be selfless.
Right.
And I think as a mom, you're actually a servant leader by being so selfless and just dedicating yourself to the growth of your children, whether they're already adults, but you're still there, not necessarily supporting them financially, but the mere presence that you are there, that they can reach out to you anytime, anytime. And that even if I go to my HR team before, they would tell me, do you ever sleep? Because if they call me anytime, I am there to answer.
But
So it's that
Grace,
selflessness. Yes, Jesse.
Yes. But you know, with what you mentioned, there should be one respect. And then even if you are compassionate, there should also be, I think, discipline.
Correct. Correct. And just like the shepherd, diba? When he tries to discipline that flock of sheep. And remember when one of the sheep would go astray, the shepherd would use his stick to pull back that lost sheep. And I think that is part of our role. That is part of our calling as a servant leader. When you're seeing that members of your team are going astray or they're demotivated or just basic things of being absent every Monday or every Friday, what do? You talk to your staff and find out, is there anything that's going on that I need to know?
Yeah.
Right? So, basic siya, Jessie, these are all basics.
But there
But I
should be a
think,
distinct, um, it has to be clear that being motherly or fatherly is different from being a servant leader. Because maybe one is manifesting just the quality of being motherly, but actually she is not actually a servant leader. Am I right, Grace?
agree, I agree. And in fact, di ba, we have moms na sasabihin nila naka-super martir or mga asawa na super martir because they just tolerate anything and everything that's going around. That's not
Right.
servant leadership.
Okay, we have
Because,
been,
go
yes,
ahead.
yes. Please continue. Because, I'm sorry.
Because there is that discipline that goes with it.
Yeah.
And it is anchored on the word of God. Like
Okay.
Jesus is our model. He is the
Okay.
model of servant leadership.
Grace, we haven't prepared for it, but you know you're leading me. Because my next question is, we have been mentioning about Jesus. Of course, we accept him as the greatest leader of all. But can you tell us, with your own personal understanding, how was Jesus as a servant leader? Or what had what kind of leader is Jesus? I would like to use the present tense, not was, is Jesus. Can you tell us he how is he as a servant leader? And tell us his style of leadership, please.
It starts with him humbling himself.
Right?
Humbled himself and he followed the will of God the Father, right? He followed the Father's will. And, you know, as a servant leader, Jesus also had a mission. So let's start with the mission of a servant leader. And what was the mission of Jesus? It was to be the Messiah, to build his kingdom, right? So as a Messiah, and then he went into his vision of building a kingdom. But he also said, come, follow me, right? So yung that portion where he says, come follow me, he is equipping others. He is equipping others to join him. And if you recall, he had the 12 apostles.
Yes.
And that was his team. That was his team. So from his mission of being the Messiah who redeemed us, he actually had the vision of building the kingdom here on earth. And he said, come, follow me. And that's also a calling for all of us. I think for
Yes.
all the viewers that
I
we
can
have
see
right
the
now.
analogy. Yes, yes.
Huh?
I can
So
see the analogy.
come, follow me. So did we answer the call of Jesus to follow him? Are we
Yes.
part of his disciples here on earth?
The discipleship. Yes, yes, yes.
Yes. So that makes him the model of servant leadership with the mission, with the vision, with the I'd call it competencies or equipping others and saying, "Come follow me,"
Yes.
because he shared responsibility. Jesus actually shared the responsibility,
The
and
delegation to Saint Peter. The
too
delegation.
many.
Too
Correct.
many.
Correct.
Yes, too
Correct.
many. Yeah.
Yeah.
Be
So
be
he did
together
not
and then
keep it. He did not keep it to himself,
right, right, right.
but he empowered Peter. Even Moses. He empowered all of you know all many. There are many servant leaders that if we go through the Word of God, marami tayong makikita. Those who have really sacrificed also their lives for others. Mother Teresa.
Yes, but I think the compelling qualities, or what if you call it qualities, or we call it competencies, is actually compassion and can we say love, and then being to serve. That was what you mentioned.
Yeah, so that servanthood that falls under that, Jesse, and then there's the stewardship.
Yes, I'm waiting
I
for
am
that.
accountable over
Yes,
you. I am the
yes.
steward of the time, the talent, and the treasure that was given to me as my blessings.
I would like you to repeat that. Servanthood and stewardship. And as
Stewardship.
stewardship, you are accountable to the organization.
And you're accountable for the blessings given to you. I
Yes.
have to take care. In simple terms, I have to take care of the time that's given to me to pursue my mission here on earth. I
You know,
have
Grace, Grace, by mentioning accountability, that means that you have to actually live yourself. You have to really disassociate your being focused to yourself because you're accountable to your mission, and your mission is actually to lead your stewardship, to lead the organization and make sure that the organization is really in good hands. So you're not actually looking at yourself, but actually looking at the rest of the organization. I
there
love
is a common saying, Jesse, that says you have to die to yourself.
right.
Ang hirap nun kasi sometimes you know what you want. You know what has to happen. But there is that dying to oneself. Like many times I've been tried and tested on this. Like as you know, I'm very I'm a very vocal person. So
I
I
know that.
open
I
up
know that. There were
and
times that you were seated in
sometimes,
one table and team up.
di ba? So sometimes I want to say something, but I have to pause and reflect if
Yeah.
what I am going to say will build up others or will they put
I
them down.
I
Kahit gusto
know.
ko nang sabihin. And I said, I have to die to myself, but I'll be very honest with you, Jesse, and to the rest who know me so well. Dying to myself, sometimes I keep quiet, but my nonverbal says it all. And I'm working on it. I tend to roll my eyes.
Yeah, I know. I know.
I tend to roll my eyes if I don't like something. I don't say anything, but I roll my eyes. And so I was made aware of that and I'm working on it. It's a work in progress, but that's part of my dying to myself.
It takes a lot of self-management, self-regulation. So awareness and then regulate so that you will really manifest the qualities of a servant leader. But I think that the difficulty there, Grace, is actually the mindset of living to it, living to it. The compassion, the love. I like that. The
Humility.
servanthood and the stewardship. And then in the stewardship, you have that accountability. Because when you say accountability, there goes the authority, there goes the responsibility. But there is the accountability that you are leading. You accepted the lead. You accepted being HR. It's not for the money, it's not for the position title. You have accepted the mission that you are the leader.
Correct. And you know, Jesse, di ba, it's so common for a lot of HR to say, oh, it's such a thankless job. I do everything, but they say, that's your job. They don't even say thank you. But that's where the servanthood comes in, right?
Yeah.
Like you do it. You do it for the love of HR. You do it for the love of the company that you work for. You do it for the people.
Yes. Yes.
So,
But you know, Grace, I think it's almost all of those who are actually working should actually have the qualities of a servant leader. Yeah. Even say you are in customer service, you are in marketing, you are,
mm,
yeah, you have to be. That philosophy of stewardship and servanthood, that should always be there, but the right one. Yeah, you're right that it can be learned. Yeah, please continue, Grace, before we have the second break. You were saying
so
something.
yeah, so a lot, I remember past President Noli Pius, many years ago, Jesse, has been
Mm.
writing about servant leadership in the People magazine.
Yeah.
And I think me, honestly, that was the time I was starting my career. I never knew what it was. And I brushed it aside. And I said, "Oh, this is just one of the leadership styles that's being talked about again." You know how it is in leadership and development. There's always the buzzword. There's always what's ongoing now. Everybody's talking about this. And so when past President Nolly was writing about it, it didn't resonate. And I just hope that you know with this session right now that we have with you and with the viewers that we have, that somehow we would realize that it is beyond just a leadership style because it is a way of life.
Yes,
It's a
that's what I
way of
mean.
life.
Because some people will just uh, look at it as transformational leadership. It is not. It is not. You have to go. Yes, you nailed it. It is a way of life. I'm just thinking now because I can read what PP Obit is writing on the on the comment section. One of these days, this show will still have long life. One of these days, I would like to invite you and PP Obit and somebody from Davao, if they will allow it. They will allow it. Well, let's have a talk show here. My guest.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we'll just discuss it because it cannot really be um what do you call it? You cannot really take it only for an hour. It has to be servant leadership should be discussed in a way, shared in a way, so that people will really take it into their lives and start doing it. I love it because even myself I'm learning it. We cannot really claim that we are. I
Yeah.
like what you just mentioned, that we are perfecting it. Similarly, what I mentioned, because the paradox here is if you are strong enough to admit of your mistakes, and then you are wise enough to admit to accept change. Diba? If you don't have those, in our forthcoming Siguro episodes, we discuss that because this is more corporate. I would like to discuss at this time the fundamentals of how you become the stewardship, the servanthood. One last before we have the second break. One last thought coming, telling us what is in the Bible of what Jesus is doing.
Ah, that's a lot. That's a lot, Jesse.
Just
I
one.
mean, like it's end to end. It's really from beginning to end. And what I've shared earlier is, you remember the washing of the feet.
Yes. Yes.
Jesus humbled himself. He shouldn't do it, but
Yes.
he humbled himself. And to me, that was a clear sign of him saying, I am here not to be served, but to serve. And, I remember in the parishes during Holy Thursday, all the lay ministers, some of them rather, would be called, diba, to participate in the washing of the feet. And it has evolved. It has truly evolved that they would, even the parish priest would wash the feet of, let's say, the vendor outside, the Sampaguita vendor, or whoever, because it is truly a sign of humility, of humbling oneself, no matter how perfect you are, like Jesus. But
You know,
he
Grace,
humbled himself.
pardon, really, Grace. You know, I really love to hear that from a lay person, from yourself. You know, I invited here a bishop, but I did not ask that. It's better that it should be coming from you, an HR, so that the HR people will emulate, will actually listen, and then try to follow, obey what you are sharing. Just before, I'm just curious, how can we actually do, I'm just curious, yung washing of the feet in our organization? Paano kaya yan? Pardon the question, ha? Paano kaya yan yung talagang you try to practice the washing of the feet in the organization? Ano kaya ang samples niyan, Grace? I'm just curious. It just come into my head. Paano kaya
Yeah,
makita?
let me stop and think, because in many times I think we have gone through that, the humbling of ourselves.
Ay, yeah.
And with some employees, like if you are, like, for example, you are already at the headship of HR, right? And I recall we had one employee who had an accident, a motorcycle accident, and this happened in BGC. Easily you can delegate that, right? You can delegate it to your team and say, you go and attend to the needs of that particular employee. But I found myself going,
Oh my
meeting
God.
her up in the hospital, because
Yeah.
I know that you're called. It is a calling, because you can easily say, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. But
Yes.
it's the humility and the reaching out. It's the compassion. It's
Right.
the compassion that you have for the least, the last, and the lost.
I love it, Grace. I love it, Grace. Nako, ang galing-galing. So let's have, Jay, let's have the second break, and then I'll ask a couple of questions before Grace gives us her parting message. Okay, let's have that. We are in the last portion of the job fair. First, on the FARE, how do you fare after listening to Ma'am Grace? So, how do you fare? Are you a servant leader? Are you actually putting to your system and manifesting that servant leadership qualities? Now, let's go to the job fair. Of course, let us help people look for jobs. And I'm just going to, is Grace related to Will Decena and Associates? If you are looking for jobs, try to email your resume to recruitment at wildesenandassociatesinc.com.ph. Puzzleback is also looking for people to join their organization, and you can send your uh, application to careers at puzzlebank-inc.com and also at Algon. So Algon, send your resume to algonplace at gmail.com. That's it. And I'm also endorsing, actually, I'm doing it now. I am conducting a virtual competency based interview webinar right after this. And I pray to the Lord that my voice will still be good up to the end of the webinar. I'm also endorsing the regional conference of Cebu. Can we have the, yes, it will be on October 7, uh, 8, and 9. Then we also have PMAP's annual conference. I will see Grace there. It will be on October 21, 22, 23. That's the national conference. And PSTD has its national convention come November 16, 17, 18. Yes. Okay. I will be both in those. Then, of course, I am the president of POPs, and we have a conference on October 15 and 16. It's free on the afternoon, but it's paid for the tracks. So try to register. Wonderful speakers and wonderful topics. Total online presence. Okay, so we come back. Let's call again Grace before we have our parting messages. Grace, a couple of questions before we. And the time runs so fast, and I mentioned it already. I hope you still have time. One is before I ask the question again back to servant leadership, I learned that this is actually as a launching of, I will claim that, of your of your consultancy. What is this the Carita consultancy? And I would like to join. I will insist. What is this all about, Grace?
Jesse, when we're retired, it's what we say payback time, right? So this is my way of helping other HR professionals and organizations grow. And we offer employee assistance program. I have been certified to do team coaching by Leadership in Motion here in the Philippines. And I'm about to get my certification for emotional intelligence with Genos. And so with that, I've already started the employee assistance program doing team and individual counseling, especially to organizations, where they really value their people and take care of the wellness and well-being of their teams. It's not only physical wellness, but it is mental and spiritual and of course psychological. So that's the Carita business consultancy for you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And still it is servant leadership because
Yes.
the keyword there is payback. Payback time. Life has been good, so it's payback
Amen.
time. Okay, just a question before your parting message. Now, can you tell us what is now the difference between a leader and a servant leader? Just to make it clear.
You know, a leader is very powerful, very autocratic, right? But the leader takes its back step. It really takes its back step. And the secular leader prioritizes the strong, the clever individuals, the sleek individuals, whereas a servant leader would prioritize the least, the last, and the lost.
I love it.
And then the secular, the world paradigm of leadership, so to speak, talks about assertiveness of your superiority or of one's superiority and complex. But the servant leader would humble in himself, will humble it himself and just let things happen for him to be exalted. He doesn't ask for it. He
Oh,
doesn't
guys,
ask for it.
my God. Nako, I love those strong words. Okay, alam ko si Obet is watching and Olin and ano, we are learning from you, Grace and
Thank
family. And I can see with my friends, and I think I'll ask them if we can see those qualities in us. We are learning from you, Grace. Thank you very much. Grace, can we have your parting message to all our viewers?
Servant leadership, as I've said, is a way of life. And let's answer the call. And I'd like to leave everybody with a quote from Kevin Hill, who's actually the author of the book Aspire, where he says, "Your gifts are not about you. Leadership is not about you. Your purpose is not about you. A life of significance is actually about serving and serving those who need your gifts, who needs your leadership, and who needs your purpose." And so, thank you so much, Jesse. It has been such a blessing to be with you and the rest of our viewers today. And looking forward to that round table with Obet
Yes, yes,
and
yes,
others.
yes, yes. Yes, Grace. Thank you very much. And I will tell you, I will like to start my conclusion is I know that you are a member of that uh,
Serviam.
charismatic Servium. PPO with is a pastoral head of the pastoral council in Novaliches. I am a lay minister and a father butler because I bring plants to the altar in Malate. And Femary is actually a servant. She's the one. What is that one that you're asking for the collection? What is the term for that?
In church?
In church. So these are actually manifestations of serving the Lord. And we can start from that. We can start from that. And also in our families, right now, after this, when you take your lunch, try to have that mindset that you are serving your husband and your children,
Yes.
and then your
Yes.
community, and then your community. And of course, today is a working day. Try to be like Jesus, washing the feet. And then wherever I ask Grace, pardon Grace for squeezing to give us a sample, and the sample is doing it because that is your calling. That is your calling. Thank you very much, Grace. I would like to end it. I was looking into my slides because I have that in one of the modules of servant leadership, the servant leadership paradox. Rick, allow me to read it. Great enough to be without pride, planned enough to be spontaneous, compassionate enough to discipline, serious enough to laugh, busy enough to listen, wise enough to admit you do not know, strong enough to open to the changes, and leading enough to serve. Let us thank Grace for sharing it with us. Those three keywords: compassionate, servanthood, and stewardship. Thank you, Grace, and thank you to all. This is Jesse Francis Rebustillo. Just marvelous po.
Bye, everyone.